track methods can be used by the service headquarters, where the entire time frame can be reduced to, well, I would say about 6 months. So it is not so difficult. Only thing that one has to project the requirement and the urgency, and it can be done. And I'm sure that the special forces probably will fall into that category. General Leader probably could throw some light on this as well. Please give a mic here. Front row.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, Admiral Sinha has already told you that the fast track procedure can be evoked. For the special forces, the good news is that all their equipment is now to go through the fast track procurement. Now, that's what has been accepted, and that's what is in vogue. And with less than a year, definitely outer limit in year, after you project this requirement through the fast track, you will have your equipment. The problem is not in procurement anymore. The problem is in your own internal functioning, where you identify what you want and then put it on the procurement procedure. Thank you.
Sir, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jain. I have a
Can you hold on for a minute? I think Mr. Nicholas has a point to make.
I'd just like to make a very short comment. As we bring high technology, we need to take into consideration the capabilities of the force and specifying officers to absorb the technology and the challenges, both in terms of projection in time and space and in terms of cost. French MOD at the time made a decision, which is a trade-off, and decided to appoint only one manufacturer as prime and system integrator. I know that generally in India it is not the rule which is followed, and so one has to keep in mind this trade-off of trying to bring down the cost on the short term by putting above any consideration L1, and the idea of keeping in mind the full life cycle cost, including Mark 1 of a system, including Mark 2, and even Mark 3, 30 years down the line after a midlife upgrade of the system. And this could be done through some collaboration between people doing specification and the manufacturers of India and their foreign partners, if there are any foreign partners.
I'd like to mention is the fast track procedure for equipment of special forces is fine, it's damn good news, but we require to also consider that is applicable when you're equipping the people. But if for a particular mission, a specific item is required in very small numbers, we should have the ability to buy it off the shelf, fly it in, and incorporate it. That's all.
Okay.
Sir, I'm Lieutenant Colonel Jain. My question is to Mr. Nicholas. The system which was shown on displayed by you on the screen, now what was displayed had a lot of data and voice moving over radio. Now the issue is in a tactical battle area where bandwidths are limited and there are a lot of forces floating, what are the bandwidths are we talking about where so much of data can be transferred? Because everything has to be real time.
Regarding bandwidth, we are talking about a personal radio, which is interconnected throughout the platoon and then to the company UHF, VHF network. I think that talking about India, at the end of 2009, it might be more relevant for radars, but still, when you talk about overloading of the spectrum, technologies are mature for a specific way to address overloading of the spectrum. I'm not an expert on that, but what I know, and this is an example, it was following the availability of new technologies, such as fiber optic technologies, for example, that at the end of 2009, Ministry of Telecom in India and Ministry of Defense decided to find an agreement so as to provide the MOD to release more spectrum to the civil domain, which is a sign that new technologies are available. Now, I cannot address in technical details, your question. I would be more than ready to start off a precise discussion after the session is over to find technical answers.
Please get a mic here.
Check. Sir, I'm Commodore Dhankar, PDSOD, looking after the Special Forces of the Navy, including the procurement. Now, this fast track thing came into question. I believe General Leader retired in 2008. Before that, certain cases for Special Forces were steered by the HQIDS, and quite a few cases were put on fast track. But let me tell you, they are all no longer on fast track. They are still being processed. And my experience is that instead of going on fast track, we would get our equipment faster if we follow the normal track. That's our experience with the complete, mechanism which exists of procurement as of now. If we have to do really fast track, then it should be done in proper letter and spirit, because the fast track procedure itself lays down so many conditions that it has to be certified by the chief, and then it goes there. And most of our equipment are such that, they are very small in quantity, and they are very unique to us. And when we process those cases, they are not bulk. So, it really doesn't work out. That fast track thing doesn't work out on that basis. So, since they are small in quantity, there should be certain, conditions laid down that with it till certain, financial limits where the powers are more delegated, especially at the, commanding officer's level, where he can straightway, like General Tej Pathak mentioned, that, he can just pick up items of the self. And a lot of innovation is involved. Special forces people keep going around the market, they look at the items, they feel that it is suited to them, and they should be given that kind of leeway. Of course, the present procedures are there. One most important thing is the single tender basis items, which don't take off only. They just don't take off. Even though provision exists in our procurement procedure that we can buy single tender equipment, but somehow the system says, please avoid this. And it's not acceptable to the system that a procedure is followed on single tender basis. That's all.
Well, all I can say is that if you're finding the fast track procedure not really fast track, then it will be advisable to identify the areas where you're getting stuck and have it projected. We have been, the government has been changing the defense procurement policy virtually every year now. So it should not be difficult to get this on board. So my request is that maybe, particularly for special forces, if you have experienced any hurdle, you must bring it out rather than keeping to yourself. And second issue is what General Pathak has just mentioned. We'll take that on with the people who are who will take the call on this as to how we can buy off the shelf. But certainly, if you are having hurdles in the fast track procedure, let me tell you that in majority of times it is not really the procedure, but your own identification of item and within your own system, finalizing the QRs are a bigger hurdle, where the fast track procedure time limits expire before it is actually projected to the agencies who are supposed to procure it. That is also true. So you might as well like to see that wherever you find that there are hurdles and you have some procedure shortening recommendations, just make it and I'm sure that, these people will look at it. Yes.
I'm Brigadier Iqbal Singh, retired. My question is, Mr. Nicholas, how do you select a soldier in your army? Do you take into account his educational qualifications, his IQ level, before you load him with this technology, which is the latest technology, which I don't know whether he'll be able to handle it, or how do you train him, and how much time do you take to make him familiarize with this technology?
Well, I'll tell you how we did it and what the French are doing now. You have rightly said that the implication in terms of training, in terms of doctrine, in terms of tactics is huge. And we have only started to understand and modify our concept and employments of special forces. I'll address your question.
No, I'm only concerned with the level of the soldier. As
I'll
to
come
how
to
you
that.
select him.
I'll come to that.
For special forces, do you take into account his intelligence level, IQ level, and his education qualification?
We generally, it's the job of the French Army and French Ministry of Defense. But in our case, in the in SAGEM case, we rely a lot on ex-Foreign Legion and ex-Special Forces soldiers. Now, regarding French MOD training, we have now started to work with the French MOD and French Army to modify the training program. And let me say that initial absorption of a young soldier in his early 20s would be 1 year, okay? But there is a big difference. Like I said, 10 years ago, nobody was carrying a smartphone in his pocket. As I speak, most of the youngsters do. So the pace of absorption will grow, and I expect that it will be a continuous iterative process between doctrine and between training for the next 5 to 6 years until the training program is well amended. So I could give you a firm and complete answer in a couple more years.
Chair, I am G.D. Sharma. My question to General Patel. He has mentioned two things, trading of quality versus quantity by the Indian Army, secondly, low-grade manpower. In our time, there used to be only 4 or 5 professions, defense forces, or be advocate, or civil service, or engineering, and all that. As on date, there are plethoras of avenues. Just a young boy straightway entering to the field where he is earning around 1 lakh rupee a month. In our time, we couldn't dream of. Since better opportunities are at the other end, all may not find it attractive or otherwise to come to this side. Secondly, on our higher hierarchy, we have got system of musical chair of 1 year. After every 12 months or 1 year or this thing, appointments are being changed. Is this affecting our system? And regarding J&K, it is a complicated problem where politicians are required to take decision for certain grievances. Security forces, it may be CRP, it may be BSF, it may be army, they are just pumped in. For that, they cannot be blamed. And in J&K, where many has been caught having the Indian Army or other defense position on their laptop, no action has been taken against them. Even 3 months back, in Thana, where the FIR was lodged for staging the war against the country, no action is there. What lesson we are giving them? Anyway, those are my comments, which I don't think anyone can reply here. Mine is only quality versus quantity, and low-grade manpower. Could you kindly elaborate on this? Thank you.
As far as your comment is concerned, sir, it will be very difficult for us to address that issue because it is not really the part of subject which is being covered. Yes, sir. Okay, so the part that you have asked for General Pathak's talk, he'll probably address that.
See, the question is today, are talking about the Army Special Forces, their manpower pool is limited. They are looking at primarily from one regiment, the parachute regiment. I would say enlarge your selection from all arms and services of the Army. It gives you a chance because the skill levels are there. And let's not base our total thing on a military occupation speciality. That a guy who joined the infantry, that's a military occupation. When he joined it, he didn't even know. A person from artillery, a person from sappers. No, let's build our special forces on aptitude. So once you enlarge the base of intake, instead of limiting it to one or two regiments, there are inbuilt solutions, you can find it. Your quality of manpower will increase. That is one aspect of it. And increase the allowances of special forces. That's another aspect of it. Third, couple it with training. So when I say when you expand from a base of 3 battalions to 9 battalions in a span of 4 years, your quality has to go down. And the training has got to go down. You've got to have the special forces soldier as capable of taking decisions like a leader. So it requires a training regime. Yesterday, General Sabharwal, another speaker, spoke about a special forces training school. So these are issues that we need to address. And when I said that, when you look at modernization, technology, it is organization and concepts. A change of one will trigger a response and should trigger a response in the other. And if we don't respond, then we are creating new structures, putting in old sofas and furniture and saying it hasn't delivered. Thank you.
Last question, Mr. Bharat Kanad. No, one, just. Please give the mic here.
General Pathak, there's something intriguing you said in your presentation. You talked about self-destruct. That sort of stuck in my mind. Would you elaborate a bit?
See, but the question is, there are certain pieces of equipment. Let's say you've launched an operation. Theoretically, you've got a protected vehicle, which is air transportable. You may be able to pull out your manpower after the completion of a mission. After maybe you are not able to retrieve a platform. So instead of at a later stage, somebody else, the enemy, using it, or leaving your signature too wide, I would rather have it's got ability to self-destruct.
General Jambal.
I have a view and a question, sir. We've been hearing about when it comes to equipping the armed forces, the special forces, we talk of budget, and even the chair during his opening remark mentioned that budget is a constraint. However, the figures which were projected by Brigadier Surinder Singh, which says for a present NATO soldier, you require about $20,000 to equip him in the form of a system. Well, if we have in India about 10,000 special forces soldiers, the figure comes to about 500 crore rupees. The first question to Admiral Sinha as such is 500 crore rupees such a big cost for national security? Okay, you take another 500 crore rupees for support systems for this, comes to 1,000 crore rupees. No, if this is the kind of budget, I don't think this is any constraint. If there is any constraint, it is the national will and the will of the armed forces? That is my question number one, sir. My question number two is, it derives out of the first question, the capacity building. I think there is a confusion between special operations and special forces. Special operations can be undertaken by non-special forces also. People yesterday were talking of, some speakers were talking of, someone blasted a gun position. That's a tactical operation to be undertaken by an infantry soldier. I don't think we are wasting our special forces and we are bragging about it. I don't think that's a huge achievement. The special forces typically should be used for strategic purposes and not for tactical purposes. Giving examples of 1965 war, launching a raid here and a raid there, or in the Kargil war, these are typically infantry tasks and roles. I draw my mind to the 2611. I think it's a national shame. 8 guys, 10 guys, having been trained for barely 3 months, they cause mayhem. There is a whole lot of army there. There is an infantry battalion there. They're waiting for NSG to come there. Why don't we make this capacity building within the infantry battalion? Have 8 to 10 crack teams on the lines of special forces. We do have some kind of a loose Ghatak platoon, but that is just a loose Ghatak platoon, neither adequately trained nor adequately equipped. Our conditions are different. We are tending to follow the Western model. We have today urban terrorism, we have rural terrorism, we have industrial terrorism, we have our conventional problems to sort out. There are no conventional enemies in Europe, in the American subcontinent. We have a whole lot of problems. Our capacity building needs to be mushroomed to the units of the armed forces. An RT regiment, if its gun position is under attack, it doesn't have to look up to a special forces team. They should have an inbuilt special forces team. So my recommendation towards that end is, when we have 4 companies, say an infantry battalion hypothetically, why can't one company be a special team as such? And having seen the cost effect, what was projected by Brigadier Surinder Singh, I think it's not a very big, very major ask. So conceptually, I think we need to change ourselves. Our special forces need to be mushroomed. The plethora of problems that we have in the country, terrorist problems, they need to be everywhere. We don't need to be waiting for them. The army is everywhere. The armed forces are everywhere. We must utilize this capacity. We must build this capacity. If I could kindly accept request for the comments of General Pathak on this aspect and the chair on the aspect of the budget, please. Thank you, sir.
I think we'll accept both these points as a comment rather than a question, because these are your views. When you said that 500 crores is not a big money, certainly it's not a big money. All I said was that you will have to cut your cloth as per the budget. Only for information, that it is the first time in last 40 years that armed forces will be utilizing their full budget. So there you are, you have money but you can't spend it. So the point I made was that the budget very much will dictate your purchase list, and that's about it. Whether 500 crore is a big money or a less money, that is up to the organizations to identify. But only as a corollary, I mentioned that this is the first time in last 40 years that the entire defense budget would have been spent. And probably the whatever has been projected in last 1 year, as far as the acceptance of necessity is concerned, I can quote the figure, which is 1,43,000 crores, which is not a small money. It might take us many years to consume that money. So there is, but budget is obviously very much a constraint. As far as the second aspect is concerned, well, we are just running short of time. I have finished off, in fact, I've gone beyond the time of the session. Maybe during the tea break, you can have a word with General Pathak and get this out. As I said, these are your views, and I'm sure that people respect your views. There's no harm in having an independent view that every regiment must have a platoon which is SF. It's a damn good view, and I'm sure that people who are here, they will take this back and try and put it in use. Thank you. All that remains for me, ladies and gentlemen, that there's one point that I want to make. which I said in the beginning, that when a special force is landed in an, they will always be in an alien sort of environment, and we do not know what kind of terrain and what kind of situation they are going to face. And that brings me back to General Pathak made in the last answer that he gave, he made a very good mention of this point, that you should have people with aptitude and various other specializations. It is important. And when you drop them in an alien environment, you do not know whether you will be sort of be required to take on a sort of technical target or a human target. You'll have to wade through water, you will have to wade through which kind of obstacle. And therefore, this multi-speciality and a multi-service kind of specialization in a combined SF, to my mind, is quite important. And we saw that. We have had 1 or 2 exercises where joint SF was used in exercise forum and in some cases in actual ones. I think that is the way to go, which will also bring us to get to identify a common equipment for the soldiers, which was also brought out by our speakers, which is a smart soldier or a SF soldier primarily must have a specific weapon, all of them must possess, and because of their speciality, because of their conditions of their own service, they can be utilized in the alien environment. So that is, and obviously the training is going to be together, the training should be together. Only when they have to go back to their specific area of specialization, those could be addressed by a different school or a different training establishment. I'm sure some of it will get addressed in the next session when the HR issues are being discussed. All that remains for me to acknowledge the knowledge which was brought in by the speakers and join me in giving them a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I now request Major General K.B. Kapoor, Director St. Joe's, to kindly present the mementos to the chairperson and to the speakers. We thank Vice Admiral Sinha for chairing this session. Thanks to Lieutenant General Retired T.S. Pathak. Our thanks to Brigadier Retired Surinder Singh. And thanks to our international speaker, Nicholas Mihal. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We now have a break of, we are going 20 minutes break, and we are going to be starting our next. I now invite and introduce the first speaker of the session, Mr. Bharat Karnad, Research Professor at Center for Policy Research, New Delhi. He is the author of India's Nuclear Policy, Nuclear Weapons and Indian Security, the Realist Foundations of Strategy, Strategic Sellout, the India-US Nuclear Deal, and author-editor of Future Imperiled, India's Security in the 1990s and Beyond. He was member of the first National Security Advisor Board, National Security Council, Government of India, and member of the Nuclear Doctrine Drafting Group, and formerly advisor on defense expenditure to the 10th Finance Commission, India. He's a regular lecturer at Indian military training forums and institutions. I invite him as the first speaker of this session. Our second speaker, Commodore R.S. Dhankar, Principal Director of Special Operations and Diving, Indian Navy. A qualified Marine Commando, he headed the Marco team, instrumental in intervention of MV Progress Light during Op Cactus. His non-SF appointments include command of INS Bedi, INS Dunagiri, and INS Ganga. The Commodore was Naval Component Commander and Chief Staff Officer Operations in the only joint command of Andaman and Nicobar. He's the next speaker of this session. And now I request Lieutenant General Tej Pathak as the chairperson of the session for the further proceedings of the session.
Well, we're down to the last session of the modernization aspect, and like I said in the last session, structures, very important aspect. Concepts, technology are fine. Structures are the things that are going to deliver. And along with that, we'll be addressing the issue of human resource aspects during this session. So over to Mr. Bharat Karnad for talking about structures and issues.
General Pathak, is it working? Yeah, one is working. I'm known a bit for some slight work I've done in the nuclear policy field. Fewer people know me, I think, for, again, some little work I've done in the conventional military field. But I'm particularly proud of a report I did for the 10th Finance Commission, wherein I was tasked with reprioritizing defense expenditure programs. This was the 10th Finance Commission, and we submitted our report in 1994 end. This is almost, when I began writing the report, it's a classified report, it's almost 20 years. One of my recommendations, and by the way, the report was accepted in toto by the government, Indian government, and one of my main recommendations were that because conflicts were not going to be of the kind of military mass or military mass kind of things of the older era, you have to build up special forces for expeditionary, counterinsurgency, and other tasks. And I had advocated then in the report that there be a special forces command, a joint command, incorporating all the special forces from all the services, military services. I did not then consider that every police force, every state police constabulary would also have its own commando element and regard themselves as special forces. And because there's such a proliferation, I think one should restrict our ambit to the military field, simply because otherwise you get into the great confusion about the MHA and everybody else trying to cut in on the deal as far as command control is concerned of these kinds of forces. This by way of, in a sense, establishing my very modest credentials in the special forces field, because I have had a galaxy of renowned commanders of special forces, Indian and foreign, and so I feel a little daunted speaking in their